Okay, first of all, my name is Danny. This is Becky. So we're just going to kind of walk through. I think a lot of us, we all know each other. But we want to start by saying that nothing we're going to talk about tonight is new. It's really not. We're not coming up with a brand new idea. In fact, most of this is thousands of years old. We're just kind of coming back to it, we believe. But we just want to talk about some ideas. Now, before we do that even, how many here, as a parent, you think that maybe once or twice you've done something right? Raise your hand. That's all of us. Yeah, exactly. Okay, come on, be confident.
You changed diapers.
Yes. Okay.
One.
You rocked them to bed. Whatever. Okay. How many of you maybe have slipped up and made a mistake once or twice? Raise your hand. Okay. So, hey, we're all in this together. And, again, Becky and I are not going to say, hey, we've got this figured out. My oldest is 6, and so I can't say that I know how it all works. I'm in the middle of it, okay? And your oldest is 11?
11. I almost said 10. See, I would have messed up.
Yeah.
Again.
So we don't have it all figured out, right? We don't have it all figured out. We're just saying we see some things that we believe are true, and we want to walk through those with you. So I want you to think for just a second about what the goal is for your children, okay? So think about if you could have your dream come true for your children when they turn 18, 17, 19, whatever it is, when they leave home and they sprout wings and fly off. What are some of the characteristics that you would like to see in your children? Independent, love God, success, honest, confident, work ethic, self-sustaining. Basically, do y'all think it's safe to say there's probably one word that would kind of sum all these up? Starts with an A, ends with adult. Isn't that what we want? Kind of. I mean, we kind of do, but then it's like, ooh. That's a big thing for someone who's just 18, okay? But that's kind of the goal, right? So let's remember, as we walk through this, that is the goal, is for them to be God-honoring adults when they leave our home, okay? That's really the point. Right. So we want to help with that. But it's not really just the church that's in charge of that, and I think we all know this. Did God give your children to their teachers? Did he give them to their coaches? Who did God give your children to? What about the children's pastor? No, it's the parents sometimes. It's the parents, okay? So we want to really just come back to this place and even apologize as church leaders for sometimes giving the idea that if you just give us your children for a little while, we'll take care of all the spiritual needs they have. You know, and that's just not right. God has given the parents the opportunity and the responsibility to have these children go from where they are to where they should be as they grow up, okay? So this is mom and dad. This is the parents' role, okay? Now, you can't do it alone. It's possible, but it's better if you have a team around you. So that's where we want to come in and start by remembering this is mom and dad's role, not ours. So how can we support mom and dad instead of trying to say, mom and dad, don't worry about it, we've got it, okay? So we want to be a team. We want to be working together on this. So we want to continue to provide resources and encourage you along the way, okay? So we want to make sure that we understand. Now, there's schools and there's sports teams and lots of other things, but we want to be sure that we're right with you. We're encouraging you along the way as we get into this. So along those lines, what we're saying here as a Fredonia Hill Family Ministry, we want to be empowering you, mom and dad, to impact your family for the glory of God. Our purpose is to give God glory. Our vision statement, we're called to glorify God in our lives, through the church, to the world, right? So this is the purpose, what we want to happen, okay? If we're successful, that's what will be happening. God's getting glory. So we want to empower you so that you can impact your family so that God can be glorified, okay? So we want to be a team. We want to work with you.
I think, Danny, one thing I also want to say about this, though, empowering you doesn't mean just mom and dad. Sometimes it's a grandparent. You're a grandparent that's pouring in spiritually to your grandkids, or you're an older adult in the church, right? So we realize that we're empowering all ages. All ages are part of family ministry because we all have to impact our families in one way or another. So I think it's important because we got a lot of people sitting here going, but I don't have kids in my home.
Yes.
But it does apply to us because we all are a part of raising these families.
What's so nice is when we have that mindset where we're all kind of on the same page, when we see something not working like it should, then we feel like we own some of that as well. And not just thinking, oh, those parents are having a rough time. How can I help?
How do we do this? How do we empower? How do we funnel information and resources to parents? Okay, and so this verse is really what kept shockingly coming back to us, and we kept going, okay, this is where God has us, Deuteronomy 6, 5 through 7. So verse 5, we're going to break it down, but verse 5 says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. So the idea is you're not able to pour into your children, your grandchildren, unless you have a relationship with the Lord, right? So we know that we have to have this personal relationship. So number 6, though, says, and these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. So the idea is you have to have God's word hidden in your heart. You have to know his truth. You have to be spending time in it. So as a believer who is pouring into his word and taking it in, then we're able to do this next part. And verse 7 says, you shall teach them diligently to your children. Okay, and then it says there's 4 different times that we want to focus on. You shall talk of them when you sit in your home. Okay, so we're calling that hang time, when you're hanging out at your home with your children, okay? Or when you walk by the way. We don't walk everywhere anymore, right? We drive, so we're calling that drive time, so when we're traveling, okay? When you lie down and when you rise. So these are the 4 times that we say we have got to be intentional. What's beautiful about this, though, is this is given by Moses to the Israelites. Okay, what's happened is Moses goes, okay, Israelites, this is what we've seen, right? We have been led out of Egypt. We have crossed the Red Sea. I mean, the water's parted, okay? We walked across it. Don't forget that. Teach that to your kids. Okay, and then we got across that water, and then we had this cloud and this fire, and we saw his presence. Don't forget that. Please teach that to your kids. Be intentional, right? And then he sent food from the sky. He gave us water out of a rock. Please don't forget that. Be intentional. So what he's saying here is, I'm going to give you the times to tell your kids about the Lord and what he's done and how we've seen him. When we're hanging out together at home, when we're in the car driving, now he said walking, right? When we're rising and when we're going to bed. So these are the 4 intentional times, and what's cool about that is those are the same for us. We all, every single family has those times in their life. We don't have to create them. We don't have to make them, produce them. We all have those moments. Now it's what we do with them that's the difference. And I think that's where we come in as a partner going, okay, can we help you be intentional with those 4 times? At bedtime. And so let's look at these real quick.
Just real fast.
Yeah.
So again, the key here on verse 7 is you shall teach them. Okay? It's not to take them down to the synagogue or whatever, and somebody else will teach them. This is mom and dad teach them. So this is liberating, hopefully. So I know we get calls sometimes saying, hey, will you talk to my kid about? And we love to talk to people about God. We love to. As ministers that work at the church, but all of us are ministers. And so if you're a parent, you're a minister, and you get to minister to your children. So just remember, it's you can do it. It's something that you get to do. You don't have to worry about us just doing it.
Zach and I came to a really good point. I mean, it's a hard place, but a good place. We had to sit down and go, okay, in our own lives, Danny's done this with his family. How are we being intentional with our children in these times? And one thing that I learned was I'm going hang time. Okay, well, are we on our phones? Are we on our games? Are we watching movies? Or are we taking that opportunity to talk about the Lord, having spiritual conversations? This is something built into our day that we could use for his glory, right? Are we, hang time is at home, but drive time, are we doing that in the car? Bedtime, this is where I went, oh gosh, okay, God, I need to ask you to forgive me, because what we've done, we've got 4, so we just bathing them and sending them to bed. You know what I'm saying? Like, get up, we're just sending them as fast as we can. Are you dressed? You bathed? Go, And so they're getting in bed and going to sleep, and then, are you coming up? Yeah, I'll be up. There's moments where we did and some moments when we didn't, right? Put them to bed. And this is what broke my heart is one night I thought, okay, God, I'm going to be intentional at bedtime. I'm just going to be intentional. I don't have to get the big Bible out and spend 30 minutes, but I do need to ask them. And this is the question that he prompted in my heart was, Max, when did you see God today work? What are 2 things that you saw God do? Okay, so I asked Max that question. It's just, again, a refocus for him of, oh, wait, God's at work, and I should see him, right? And so he began to just pour out all of this stuff that I would have loved to get all day long, but he doesn't give it to me. It wasn't till bedtime that he's ready to talk. And so I realized at that moment, gosh, I have not been intentional in this moment in his life, and this is when he's talking, and I'm missing it, And so that was a conviction on my part. But then wake time, we're getting up, we're getting going, and we're running out the door. How can we, in that moment, be intentionally pouring into our kids, stopping them, and praying together or reading scripture together? And there's so many resources that I'm going, I know about these resources, but parents will come to me and go, well, we kind of talk about the Lord. And I'm going, but there's these resources. And so I didn't have a way to give those out or say, okay, you're struggling with this time, this is a great resource. So we just thought, we're not partnering like we should be as a church. We're saying, we hope you got this. We know you love the Lord. Go. But we're not giving you a structure in which to grow your kids. And so that's where our hearts kind of came up with, okay, we've got to have a plan. We need a better plan. So This is the trends that we're seeing, and none of these will shock you, but I think just saying them out loud helps us to realize where we're at, right? Some trends we see in society. One of them is adolescence. 60 years ago, they didn't have this thing called adolescence, right? Like, you got to be 12, and your dad said, you're a man and wants you to start working, and you started working. There wasn't really this adolescence period. We're finding kids now, and Kendall can testify probably that at 30, they're not adults. 29, they're playing video games out somewhere, and they're not really adults. They're pushing this adolescence all the way up through the 20s. And so we go, gosh, that's scary. What have we done that's created this environment?
So I was asking the guys, and the youngest guy in there was 75, right? So I asked, hey, is this true? I walked him through some of these things we're talking about. And he said, yeah, when I was 16, I was out of the house on my own working. And so, but one of the guys, he said, here's what happened. We had it so hard that we wanted to make it easier for our kids. But as a result, they made it worse because it's through the struggle that we grow. The butterfly needs to work to get out of the cocoon. And if you rescue him, you've actually doomed him. So same thing here. It's actually good to have them struggle and grow up and work through it.
Other trends that you're seeing, of course, kids moving back in with their parents, right? That was kind of not done, but now we're seeing a lot more trends of people not just moving back in with their parents while they're going to college, but even after college, not really knowing what to do then and then moving back in. Delaying maturity, I think that's the one that we both said this is something we have to do something about because when they are 18, when we would expect them to graduate 18 and be mature, they're not. They're being delayed. They're in their 20s, right? Being mature later, and we need them at 18. Graduation from church. You see this? If they don't own their faith, if they've just been fed every time they come to church, they've never served, they've never known how to share their faith with anybody, then what happens is when they get out of church, then they graduate from it. Because then when they're out on their own, they don't really know how to own their own faith. They've never had to put it in practice or lab or anything. And so we just saw all of these trends through his youth ministry, from my children's ministry, and then just teaching in the schools. And I just went, I see these trends, and there's something that I should be doing about this. And I'm not quite sure how. And so that's where we came together and went, okay, we got to have a plan. So we intentionally say this is the dip chart. And the reason we call it that, and it's a crazy name for that's what we call it, simply because it caused us to slow down. It caused us to take a pause and go, something's wrong. So this is what the chart is. It looks crazy, and you'll get a copy of all these things. But this side of the chart represents a level of influence a parent has. Okay, so we go from 0 to 100, level of influence. This is the age of children. Now, this is the typical dip, okay, chart. This is what we typically see in most kids' lives, most families' lives. So at 0, Abigail, how much influence did you have over her? 100%. You don't feed her, she's not going to exist long, right? If you don't change her diaper, if you don't take care of her, this is where we're at, 100%. But what happens is, as kids grow up, and we've seen this over and over again, as kids grow up, you begin to kind of lose your level of influence. The reason being, now they got teachers, now they have coaches, now they have friends, and they begin to kind of listen to all those things. But the scary part is here, where there's a 0 level of influence. So you see how it cuts across right here? The idea is typically what we see is around 12, 13 years old, all of a sudden we begin to see that our influence over our kids isn't what we want it to be. It's even below 0. They hear you, but they're not listening anymore. Your level of influence has dramatically dropped in this time period. Now, typically you'll see it way low, and then all of a sudden you'll see about 22, 23, they realize, wait, my parents might have known something. Yeah, when their bank account bounces or whatever, right? So here we see them coming back up, and our influence begins to increase. Now they got kids, they need us, right? Like they are out in the real world and they need to buy a home. So all of a sudden they're asking you about how to buy that. Your level of influence again then increases right here. So this, in my world, I went, okay. So first of all, what I do right here has a huge impact on who my kids become. Second, what do I do right here to make this not so low? Or who do I put in my life that can help me in this moment? And that's where that partnership comes in, right? And so we'll talk about this later, but Lexi hits this area, and she begins to, when I talked to her, roll her eyes. Last week, I saw one of those turns of the head when I talked, and I went, no. I mean, I just wanted to call you, no. So I kind of saw it coming, right? But my first thought was, who have I put in her life? Because there's got to be somebody in her life that can speak truth into her when she's not going to listen to me. And I started listing off, okay, I've intentionally put these women around her in our church that believe the same thing I do, that love her the way I do. And I could call them and say, hey, Randy, will you go take Lexi to get some coffee? Because we need to talk about this. And I know we're going to talk the same way. We're going to have the same language, the same vocabulary. And I know you love her. So will you please pour into her? Because right now, she's in the dip. And you know what that means because we've been talking about it. And I need your support. And so this is where that partnership becomes so beautiful, right? Because we all are going to end up there eventually. Now, we're going to try to put some things in place that cause this not to happen as steeply. But this is what typically happens in most kids. And I have seen it in some of mine already. So here's the worst case scenario. Do you know this person? You probably do. This person said, okay, you had a level of influence in my life, but Mom, you blew it right here. So no longer do you get to speak into my life ever again. I'm going to disconnect from you. I'm going to go off the other direction. Whatever you say, I'm going to do the opposite. And this person never regains any sort of relationship or trust within their family. This, of course, is the worst case scenario.
We've actually had, in the meetings we've had several people say, that's me and my mom. That's me and my dad. Because whatever it is, something broke back in here. And so they said, you know what, I'm scared. I don't trust you anymore. So it's sad, worst case. But then we have.
This would be ideal, right? And this is what you guys go, okay, let's see if we can do this, right? This is ideal in that there's going to be a natural slant. I mean, it happens because they're growing up. Their bodies are changing. They're not quite sure what to do with that. So they begin listening to other influences. But our idea would be, ideally, would be that they hit this 0 level, and they might be there for a time, but then they realize, wait, the foundations that were laid here are still true. The truth that they taught me is still here. So in the moment where I get to make decisions, I still lean on that. I have a personal relationship with the Lord that speaks that truth into my life. And so I continue. It might be less, but they continue not to dip underneath this 0 mark. So that's, of course, ideal, what we would desire. So how do we do that? That's Danny and I have struggled for months and months and months and going, okay, how do we help parents in this influential time? How do we help them to lay these pillars, these foundations, okay, so that they are pouring into their kids during this time so that we don't see this dip. We don't see the disconnect. Or if there is a dip, it's because your child made a choice. They're sinful, right? They make choices. And so if they're down, they made a choice. But you can say before the Lord, you can say, I poured into them these truths that I knew were straight from the Lord, that they have the foundation, but they're making a choice. Right? And so we desire to work on these pillars and these foundations. So that's where we're coming to, is some information laid out before you and say, okay, at this grade, this is what they need to be doing. At this grade, this is what they need to be doing. But the problem is we've not been doing that until 4 years from now. But they needed it here. And so we're kind of having to back up and go, okay, what makes a mature adult at 18? Some of these things are before you're going to want to talk about them. But they're needed because this is your sphere of influence. If you wait till they're 15 to talk about sex or anything, then you have lost your sphere of influence. It's time to talk about it now. So that's where we're heading. We're going, okay, we need to put these pillars in place. Not that we teach your kid these things, but you're teaching them and we're teaching them. So we're complementing each other in this. We're working together as a partnership.
So again, we talked about God getting glory out of our lives. Okay, I think all of us would want for our whole life to constantly be just adding to the glory of God. Every day, we're adding some more. Every day, adding some more. And so when you think about that, that's a little bit intimidating to think I'm going to be better than yesterday every single day. And I think it's possible. The Holy Spirit can help us. But it's kind of intimidating. So one way we saw here that's actually exciting, where we can have that kind of result, is when we realize that not only do we influence our lives, but we influence our children's lives. So we'll just say for me, as I'm growing up, my parents teaching me, and so I'm learning how to give God more glory each day. I'm maturing in my faith is what this is. So by the time I reach 18, 19, 20, ideally, I'm going to be an adult, able to give God glory with my life, okay? But then, so I'm going to say that's going to be locked in. For the rest of my life, that's locked in, okay? But if I want to add more, great news. I can help my children as they begin their journey. For me, I get to say, hey, look, I'm helping my children, and they give God glory. So now I'm getting to count theirs too, all right? So I know you're saying, hey, you can't count both, but we're going to, okay? We're making the rules here. So you get to say, hey, my life and my children's lives giving God glory. And then it doesn't stop there, because then you can do it with your grandkids. So you have this legacy you're passing on of giving God glory. And so it continues to grow. So through your whole life, you can see not only your life, but your children and your grandchildren. Here's what's cool. Do you know that grandparents are able to speak into children better than parents sometimes? I know for me, there were times when whatever my grandpa said, man, that was it. That was basically as good as the Bible, okay? So this influence is huge. So grandparents, don't undercut or underestimate the influence that you have as well. So here's what we have. We think if you can just do this, it'll be fine, okay?
Can you see it? That's what I want to know.
We know that you can't read this right now. You'll see it in a few minutes, okay? But I'm just going to explain generally what the chart is. We can't give it to you right now because you won't ever come back, all right? You'll start reading and we'll lose your attention forever. So, but we do want to talk about what's here. Okay, so this is basically the chart, and Becky said it well. We're trying to look at when things need to be happening when we have influence, okay? So the idea is how can we use the time we have to the best of our ability? So what we've done is we've broken up their ages here. So we have just the ages, babies to 2, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 1st through 4th grade, 5th and 6th grade we're calling preteen, 7th and 8th grade, 9th and 10th, 11th and 12th, okay? Basically the whole time we have typically had them in the home, right? We call these phases up here. This first one, when they need us really badly, we call parental influence, which is, we have all the influence. Whatever we say, they do, whether they want to or not.
And they're learning at this stage those basic things that they need they learn how to walk, talk,
Right.
So that influence, if they never walk or talk, then we've got a big hole somewhere. So This is the most time that you could spend with your kid. You have the most amount of influence.
I've actually heard someone say that this time from 0 to 5 probably is when people learn 50% of all they ever learn in the first 5 years of their life. Crazy amount of learning going on. So we want to make sure that we're putting God things in there as that's happening.
And we tend to think, though, like 2s and 3s, they're okay. They'll just play. They'll just toddle along. But it's our job to go, okay, in this moment, talking to them about you're fearfully and wonderfully made, how God, pouring those truths now and not waiting till they can hear and understand and repeat back to you what's going on.
So we have the different sections here. So the teaching focus, you'll see it all the way across here. For this age group, here are the things that we believe they need to be hearing, that they're ready to understand and learn, as you mentioned. So you'll see that we have the different topics that we know they're going to need later, and we'll choose when we're going to begin those.
So it's exciting to think how much glory God would get from these kids.
So there's all these different topics: scripture memory, apologetics, God and me, evangelism. Another section that I haven't covered yet is this one across here called milestones. And this is something that we haven't given a lot of attention to lately, but it's really starting to grow and influence in churches of having milestones. The one that's probably most popular is this one right here called the rite of passage. You heard of the rite of passage? Maybe you've read about that or seen someone talk about it. So basically, the first milestone back here is baby dedication, okay? And so if you've seen the baby dedication that we had just recently, man, just a rich time, where it's not really the baby being dedicated, it's mom and dad being dedicated to being the parents that God wants us to be. And then salvation, obviously, is a big step in the journey. Then to say, yes, I surrender my life to Jesus Christ. I want to follow him and believe. Okay, so those are two huge milestones. But then this other one, we're really excited about the preteen area. We feel like this is an area we've underestimated and probably under-resourced for a long time. But we see now this is a key area. As we've been putting these things in, we say, man, 5th and 6th grade, this preteen time is huge because we still have voice, we still have influence, and they're listening, And it's also a great time because their minds are really starting to crunch through and be able to understand things more critically and make decisions. So the rite of passage is the thing that happens there. It really helps a young boy understand, okay, now I'm beginning to take responsibility as a young man. And for a woman to say, hey, you know what? I'm now a young woman. And so we begin to change how they live. We begin to ask more from them, give them more responsibility, and expect that they'll handle it as a young adult. So that's how you begin to really ramp up for them this idea of taking charge and building trust and so on. So the rite of passage is a key time, and we're excited about being able to give resources and structure for dads to help their young boys become young men, and moms the same with their young ladies. Like a communication device. I'm not going to ask anybody to testify or confess, but what if we made them earn it? And it's not just when you turn a certain age or when you go to a certain class, but you have to prove, in this section we call trust building, you've proven by the way you've acted and the decisions you've made that you can be trusted with this. So here are some different pie graphs here. Just call me Ross Perot, I guess. Okay, so at age 4, At age 4, you've got.
You've never said that in a meeting.
I'm sorry,
I
it's
like
new.
It,
All right, so
great.
the blue is taking, right, and the red is giving. All right, so here we go. At age 4, they're not giving much at all. They give you a smile, you get a little lift from that, and that's it, right? So age 4, not a whole lot of help. But then what we're saying is when it's time for them to move into being a young man or young woman, that really needs to have ramped up by that point. Okay, say 1/3 or something like that. They need to be contributing to what's happening in the home. All right, and then if we're going to have adults, and what we're saying, adults give as much as they take. But you're a parent and you're giving a lot, okay? And we all know that. That's part of the joy of being parents, right? But you're a grandparent sometime in there, so you're still giving, right? You're still helping more than you are taking. But then you know what? You get old someday. And it starts to go back. It's just a big circle, right? Okay, so we've covered a lot of stuff, and we said, hey, again, this is just an overview of some thoughts and some things that we believe God would have us to go as far as a direction. But this is not all laid out, and it's not perfect, and it's going to change. You're going to teach us a lot, and we're going to learn more as we go. But we do think there's probably going to be some questions and some ideas that come up. In fact, we've had some really good ones come out as we've talked. One of the guys was pointing out on our chart, we didn't have a line for finances. He's like, oh, we need to add that. So we have a lot more work to do. But some frequently asked questions. Here's some that we've put together, and maybe there'll be some that you had. So number one, you got it?
Yeah. Are you trying to make my child grow up faster? Yes. Yeah. The idea is, I mean, that's scary, but the idea is that if you want a mature adult before they leave your home because they're going to be on their own, yeah, they have to grow up a little faster than they are currently. Because what we're graduating, not just Fredonia Hill, but all over the world, what we're graduating is not mature adults. And they're not glorifying the Lord. They're glorifying themselves.
So what's the rollout plan? Question number 2. And there's a whole bunch of ideas. And again, you are going to give us more as we go through this. So we can't do it all like next week. But we do want to begin to put some things in place this fall. And we'll put some more in the spring of 2014 and some more in the fall of 2014, then the spring of 2015. So this is going to be a slow process to get all this put in. And again, we're going to learn as we go. But just know we want to begin this fall.
Is it too late for me? I don't think it's ever too late because the story of God is not that, and it's never too late for us. But we might sit at a place where we look at this chart and we go, okay, well, our kids are way down here and we've missed all of this. Then we stop and we pray and ask Him to fill in those gaps. And from this day forward, we glorify God in our families. Right. So that's what we do. And there's no shame in that, and there's no frustration that has to occur. He'll give us peace when we come before Him and go, okay, we surrender. We've maybe messed up or neglected some jobs of ours. But I think He fills those gaps.
So is this guaranteed to work? Question number 4. Is it guaranteed to work? Can you guarantee anything with kids, right? We understand that, but we still want to be faithful with our part of the deal. So if you say guaranteed to work, if that means I can stand before God one day and say, hey, I gave it, I was obedient, I did the best I could, yes, we know that we can stand there before Him and say, hey, we were faithful with what you gave us to do.
I'm busy. How can I add this to my busy schedule? But the idea is, okay, so if we're really honest before the Lord, though, and we say, okay, God, I really want to be intentional, then the first step of that is preparing our schedules so that we're intentional those 4 times, right? I think this is where we have to sit before our husband and our family and say, okay, let's lay these intentional moments and then build around it. It might mean that things change.
The next question is, my kids are busy. Who controls their schedule? You do,
We do.
right? You do. So we control this. And so, man, wouldn't it be great for them to see us, for us to model for them, look, we're going to set priorities in our life. And this, and this are going to be in there no matter what. And then maybe we'll add some other things on top of it. Is this going to be hard? Yes. Probably the reason it's going to be hard is because the toughest reason is because it's going to be different. But whenever we see something and God pricks our heart, to make a change hurts. And the other thing that's going to make it difficult, I think, will be that other people around you may laugh at you.
It's going to look different.
Yeah, you're going to have people saying, that's weird. Okay. So yes, it's going to be hard, but it'll be worth it. So question 9, when's the next meeting? June 26th. And we'll send out more information on this. But June 26th, toward the back end of June there, we're going to have another meeting. It'll be part 2. We'll roll out more of what's going to happen this fall. Okay? So yeah, June 26th, it'll be a meeting a lot like this. We'll be here, and we'll talk about what's next.
What can I do? The first thing we're wanting you to do is in this packet that we're going to give you, there is an intentional family appraisal. That's what we think that's the best way to start, okay? Because you can go home just feeling guilty or feeling like you're right on, or you can have all kinds of emotions from something like this, and I have. But what we'd like to do is kind of say, okay, spouse, Or by myself, where am I? And what we're doing here with our family is appraising where they're at. This is every 120 days. Good. So, because our seasons of our lives change, my summer looks completely different than my fall.
So we have a whole bunch of resources here. So, I mean, again,
Okay.
she's talking about the 4 intentional times we want to be pouring into our kids. And so there are some great resources out there, and this is just the beginning of it. You know, life is busy, and we haven't been doing this. We're not in the habit of it. So our minds, like she said, thinking about 1,000 things. So it gives us a great, just, man, we can do it real quick. So that's really, really nice. So again, we just want to say, hey, Lord, before you, we want to be good stewards. We want to be intentional with what you've given us as parents. So